So we spend the next week driving up and down the streets looking for the house. Pretty soon my mother says, that's it. Okay, my dad goes up. The guy says, how'd you know that we had this house for sale? Well, I just knew you did. I thought you did. Do you? Yes. He said, but my wife and I didn't make up our mind to sell it till last night. So we bought the house, and I thought, ugh, scary. So about a year later, I went to another party. The same thing happened. So I told my friends, I said, I can't cope with this. And they said, your mother could be a witch. You could wind up in some cave up in Tibet or something. They said, you better get out of there. I mean, this is bad business, you know? Okay, so I'm 16 years old. I looked in the mirror. This is it. I left home. Put my little suitcase and I said, Mom and Dad, I love you. I can't handle this anymore. I got to live my own life. I want nothing to do with your God because He won't let me do nothing. I want to party. I want to do this. And your God won't let me do this. By this time, I was starting to withdraw from God. And I said, I want nothing to do, so I've got to go out on my own. So I left. Well, I worked around the country, and then I turned to be 18. And I'd always had this desire to be the best that I could be. When I was in junior high, I ran track and stuff. And if I got beat, I got mad and had temper tantrums and played tennis, same thing. So you can about imagine what I did if I wanted to be the best that I could be. I enlisted in the Marines. So I got through Marines, and I took 2 months of special ops training. Of course, the Marines always deny, anybody knows about the Marines, always deny they got special ops, but they always have had, from the Raiders in World War II to right now. So I got done with 2 months of training, and my DI sat down, Gunny Sergeant sat down after the ceremony at graduation, and he says, Garner, I want to give you a compliment. He said, we don't give many around here. No kidding. And he says, if I ever go into combat, he said, I want you with me. He says, you were the deadliest killer we've had in here in months. So I went through the Marines, lived through it. I thought it was because I was a real stud, but I look back, God saved my life so many times I can't believe it. So I got out of the Marines, got married, had a couple kids, but I had trouble adjusting to civilian life. And so, sure enough, I got hauled back in front of the psychiatric board again. So they gave me a whole day's worth of tests. They called me back in the next day. They're sitting around this table looking at me. They said, Keith, we don't know what to do with you. They said, we have never had anybody like you. I don't know what company it was, but it was in Philadelphia. And they said, we've given this test to 850,000 people. You were the first one that scored 0 in emotion, first one that scored 0 in religion. They said, you'll never be able to love anybody, and you'll never be religious. The company wants you to come back to Philadelphia. They want to do more tests on you, so they pay your way back. They'll give you a rental car, they'll pay for your motel, they'll give you all the money you want to spend, just boogie. And I says, if they can't figure out what's the matter with me today, I'm not going to Philadelphia for anything. So I walked out, left my car, walked down the street. I came to this park and I sat down on the park bench. And I said, now what am I going to do? Because they had just told me officially the same thing they told me when I was in the 7th grade. That the only thing I'd ever be was a professional killer. They wanted me to go back in the Marines and be a professional Marine for the rest of my life. This voice said to me, and I heard a voice, okay, seriously. And the voice said, you remember when you were a kid you wanted to be a doctor? Yeah, I kind of wanted to be a doctor. The reason I wanted to be a doctor because I loved, medicine and stuff. And I didn't, it wasn't because I loved people particularly, but I thought I was smarter than anybody else that I could be a doctor and figure out what's the matter with everybody else. So, I said, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I went back, got in my car, drove home, told my wife, I says, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go to California. At that time I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm going to go to college and I'm going to be a doctor. And she says, what? If you leave me and quit supporting me, I'm going to divorce you. Well, I said, honey, I got this friend who I knew in the Marines. He was a pilot, and he was teaching in a school out there, and he said if I ever need any help to come out to his college, and he'd help me. So that's where I'm going. I said, so be nice to the kids, and I'll try to stop by and see them once in a while. So I packed up my car and went to California. Got through college, God got me into medical school at the University of Nebraska, and I graduated from medical school in Nebraska, took my residency in Kansas City, took it to Jewish hospital. Well, I got along fine, because they didn't particularly want anything to do with Jesus. I didn't want anything to do with Jesus, so we used to joke about, who's going to burn who in a pile of logs and all this stuff. And so my life was relatively uneventful, except I met a nurse, and the nurse was a student of Ayn Rand. I don't know if any of you know Ayn Rand, but she had the objectivist philosophy. Basically, there's no God. The whole universe is in your mind. And whatever you decide to do with your mind, that's what's going to happen to you. Well, I dug this. I actually went around and gave speeches on objectivism because I thought, wow, this is cool. Man, I got my mind, and my mind is leading me, and I sure want nothing to do with God. So this is really great. So then my son grew up, and I went and started practicing in Cherokee, and I had started racing in college. And so then we formed this racing team, and my son was a genius mechanic, and so that brings us up to when God hit me. And so I decided, well, better get married, so I got married and baptized in the Spencer Church in Iowa. Moved to Fountain Hills. I wanted to retire, and so we looked around, found a house in Fountain Hills, came out here, and so I didn't know what to do,